and welcome to today's Wednesday webinar from Serrala. Today's topic is Carry Your Organization to the Summit with Cash Management and Liquidity Forecasting on SAP S/4HANA. My name is Christine Monk, and I'll be your moderator today. I'm part of the marketing team here at Serrala. Before we begin, I'd like to get a few housekeeping items out of the way. We will have a few polling questions throughout the event, so when you see a poll pop up, please take a few seconds to enter your answer, and we'll share the results afterwards. This session qualifies today for AFP credits, the CTP CCM recertification credits with the Association for Financial Professionals. So if you're interested in receiving those credits, you have to stay on for the duration of this session, and then please send us an email, and we would be happy to get you the credentials for that afterwards. If you have any questions for our speakers today, there's a Q&A panel at the bottom of the session that will allow you to ask them directly. Oh, wait a second. There we go. And right now, let me introduce you to our speakers today. So first of all, we'll have Peter Wolf, who's our Senior Vice President of Finance and Treasury Solutions at Serrala. Peter's been specializing in SAP Treasury Solutions for over 20 years. His experience and expertise span the entire suite of SAP's Treasury, cash management, and electronic banking applications. My other colleague, Jatin Thakur, will be joining us today. He is a Senior Manager and Senior Solution Architect at Serrala. Jatin has over 15 years of experience evaluating, designing, and implementing cash, treasury, and risk management technology solutions for multinational and public sector companies. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Peter, who'll give you an introduction to Serrala.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're glad you are participating, and we look forward to talking through this subject with you and hopefully bring some good insight for you. So very briefly, the agenda for today is to first give a short introduction to Serrala. Then we'll want to talk about the problem statement. What's the issue? What's going on? Why is there even a need to look at this area? We will then follow that with a focus on the SAP Cash Management Liquidity Forecasting solution, what's available in that solution, and how that solution can be deployed to address the problems that we see clients confronted with. And then we'll talk a bit about the path forward, where we think there are other opportunities for you to gain visibility and increase your understanding of solutions that can help you to address your problems. So first, the introduction to Serrala. So who is Serrala? We are the leading software and service provider in the area of universal payments. And what does that mean? That's the full breadth of all aspects of payment management, inbound and outbound, order to cash, procure to pay, upstream, downstream management of all processes and functions that relate to the execution and the processing of payments, the cash around those payments, the exposures, the documentation, treasury aspects of dealing with holding those funds and making sure that you have the availability to cover those payments and to appropriately optimize your use of funds when funds are received from payments. So this area has been our focus for a couple of decades, and we've now built up a client base of over 2,500 customers. 25% of the global Fortune 100 are clients of ours. We have over 30 years working in the SAP financial treasury and automation space. Over 700 employees focused in these areas across the world in 16 locations. So we have a very broad footprint, a long background of experience, and in particular in the area of treasury services, we have over 400 projects. We've been focused in this area, excuse me, as I said, for a few decades, delivering on projects in North America, Europe, Asia, Latin America. So essentially pretty much everywhere there are corporations, we've been delivering on projects there with a emphasis and focus on the treasury space. And it's really all areas of under the umbrella of treasury within SAP. So that's in-house banking, debt investment, derivatives, cash management, liquidity forecasting. All of those areas we summarize into kind of the header of just treasury management. And we were the first implementers of S/4HANA in North America, treasury solution on S/4HANA. We have the largest team of SAP Treasury specialists So that brings a lot of insight, background, experience from previous projects and variety of delivery options that enables us to assist our clients in a way that no one else out there can. Excuse me. We also are, in addition to being a service provider, we are a software provider, allowing us to extend and enhance the solutions that SAP delivers to make them even more attractive for clients from an efficiency, controls, oversight, reporting, and management perspective. And we continue to deliver on certified solutions in not only ECC environment, but also in the S/4HANA environment. And so we feel strongly and confident that this background puts us in a position to be able to give good insight to these areas that we're certainly going to cover today. So problem statement. What is it that we find our clients and the marketplace in general confronted with? Well, in general, when we talk about organizations, certainly there are organizations that are domestic only to the United States, but it tends to be that most organizations have international footprints, or certainly an increasing number have international footprints, and that creates a extremely dynamic, complex environment, multiple cultures, multiple structures, processes, bank relationships, corporate structures to deal with. And when we look at combining this with a decentralized processing and decentralized operational execution, which also typically is accompanied by a wide variety of banking relationships, which are also decentralized, it creates a challenging environment for clients to be able to appropriately manage their liquidity and their forecasting. In addition to this, we see that high volume processing, as I already said before about multi-currency, these add a layer of complexity to the solution or to the requirements for visibility to ensure appropriate visibility to liquidity needs, to exposures, to appropriate optimization of funds that you have, either investing or borrowing or paying down debt, et cetera. All of these things require insight and visibility to do optimally. And when we combine this further with the typically complex intercompany relationships that ultimately also lead to external settlement requirements, you end up with an extremely complicated situation. I have here resulting in a murky mess. It's obviously not a technical term. Reality is many companies have an extremely complicated solution and do have some controls and feel that they have decent visibility. But most companies find this extremely challenging, and all companies really are challenged with the environment that they can always be looking for improvements and opportunities to optimize overall their delivery and their management of cash and liquidity in today's world. With the increased volatility, especially that we have and that we've seen over not just the last few months, but really the last couple decades, with constant upheaval in the financial markets. So we've obviously had some major upheavals, but really every year you see situations arise. Many of them we forget now after having these larger upheavals. So we look at the Greek debt crisis, European debt crisis, Argentinian debt crisis, Turkey currency issues. So the list goes on, and being able to control and manage your cash and liquidity in that kind of dynamic and volatile situation is critical to the success of most organizations. And so what we want to do is go into and talk about how these things can be addressed in an efficient and effective way in the SAP environment. So we are actually at our first polling question.
That's great.
Christine, if you could help out here.
For sure. So we wanted to ask everybody on the line, from a cash and banking management perspective, what does your treasury organization spend the most time doing? Are you more worried about cash positioning, cash forecasting, payment management, risk management, compliance management, or bank account management? really there's probably some combination of all of it. Which one is your number one concern? And so you should be able to submit your answers online. I think, the situation's been so dynamic over the last few months, it feels like every day there's some new news out there. Are you seeing any trends in the currency market that you want to speak on specifically since this pandemic's happened, maybe, Peter? Or I know I've seen lots of large banks.
Interestingly, because
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, interestingly, I think I'm looking forward to seeing what the responses are because pretty consistently, and I don't want to influence people's responses, we've seen a certain pattern of emphasis in these areas, I would say, before the pandemic. And now really with the pandemic and what's going on in these markets, the emphasis we're seeing definitely focus. So I'm interested to see these results, and then we'll compare them to some survey results that we have from last year as well.
Yeah, we have a little bit of data that we've been collecting through these pollings and these webinars, so it'll be interesting to compare and contrast that a little bit later. So do we want to maybe take a little moment here and see what the results are? And let's just see. Yeah. So I guess cash forecasting seems to be at the top of everybody's mind, and that makes a lot of sense to me because obviously at this time, cash forecasting was such a dynamic economic situation. People really need to know what cash is coming in, what cash is going out, and how they can control liquidity in their organization. We just even had a Serrala event this morning, North American time, but for our European colleagues in the afternoon, talking about how companies can ensure liquidity, and cash forecasting was a big part of that. So that's kind of interesting. Do you have any thoughts on why risk management is a little bit lower, or?
Well, excuse me. It is surprising that risk management is set so much lower. I think to some extent the emphasis and focus on cash forecasting and cash positioning are about managing risk. They're about managing your liquidity risk. I think so. In effect, I think there is actually a risk management aspect there that's maybe not being clearly called out. But I think the forecasting and the positioning, as from what we're seeing, and this is again our kind of results and what we're seeing from talking with clients, and sure, AFP had some surveys that these are areas that are of huge emphasis now since the pandemic. If we go to the next slide, we actually have some results from some previous surveys from last year talking about the areas that are consuming the most amount of time. And you can see that payment management and cash positioning, forecasting are up at the top of the pack as far as the areas that they're spending the most time, which I would say is also an emphasis on their importance. But there's also the aspect here of, is this an effective managed process? If it's ineffective or inefficient, I should say, then that can lead to increased time to execute on that process. And I think when you look here on the right-hand side, it talks about what is one of the greatest concerns to your organization as you go forward in dealing with the challenges that are confronting you, and manual process is one of those, really the highest. And what we see often is that the cash management process is a highly manual process. And that's one of the big challenges and issues that confront organizations. They're manually pulling the information from a variety of sources and consolidating that through non-systematic means. And that makes it extremely inefficient. That makes it also highly risky. And why we see so many organizations having opportunity to increase the efficiency and the effectiveness of their processes overall. And so
Absolutely. I just wanted to jump in for a second, Peter, and just say that I forgot to say that the bank account management result was equally as important to people in the poll. And I think maybe that's a process that's quite manual that for many people, right? Reconciling all that information across multiple banks, maybe multiple bank accounts. Globally, it gets even more complex, as your diagram showed us so elegantly.
Absolutely.
So that's a good example.
Absolutely. And so when I pull up this slide here, it's just a summary of key points that we see, the emphasis and the areas of focus, the concerns that Treasury organizations have as we've been working, not just in the pandemic again, but really even over the last year, really the areas of focus that we're seeing organizations that with the typically highly fragmented standalone system solution with decentralized operations, different banking relationships. Without that integration, that we have companies having tremendous difficulty effectively forecasting their needs, effectively understanding their exposures for their currency, the foreign currency and local currency, their needs to fund certain activities. And so as a result, you see obviously increased risk to organizations or increased inefficiency because entities leave funds idle in accounts because they don't have good forecasting capability. And as a result, they need to leave funds sitting around in case a payment comes in is needed or funding is needed for something. So you end up with a suboptimal working capital environment that can be, with an appropriate systematic solution implemented, can be addressed in an extremely attractive way, leading to tremendous increase in financial results because you can either pay down debt or you can more attractively invest funds, and you certainly can manage risk in a better way. But on this list, you can see as well, we have the banking aspect. So weak banking controls and fraud management risk, and also banking fees, overhead costs. So the whole management of your accounts is a critical component. Without the ability to have clear visibility, good management, oversight, and control of your bank accounts, it's almost impossible to have effective cash management and liquidity forecasting. Obviously, if you don't even know what the accounts are for or that you have the accounts, then it's impossible to say that you fully understand what your funding needs are and your liquidity needs are. And this is an area that typically when we go in and meet with clients, where they'll say they have a spreadsheet solution that they're leveraging, and we'll start out and look to automate that solution. We'll talk about that in a minute, but look to automate that solution, and almost without exception, as we go through that process and go into due diligence, helping them to ensure that they have all their bank information, we end up coming up with large numbers of bank accounts that are managed locally or by different organizations, sub-organizations within the enterprise, and that brings a lot of visibility and understanding to risks and exposures they have. Risks, as I already said, from ability to effectively forecast liquidity needs, but also from exposure and risk management from fraud. If you don't have appropriate visibility and control over those bank accounts, you certainly can't have good control over them from a fraud management perspective. So understanding all of this as kind of the basis of the situation, what we'd like to do is talk about how SAP and SAP leverage with other, incorporating other aspects we want to go into to deliver on an optimized overall global solution. I'm going to turn it over to Jatin to take on the next section here.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's webinar. We are hopeful that one of the ideas we present today will have a positive impact on your business. As you can see from this slide, SAP provides integrated and comprehensive solution for treasury management processes. Today's focus will try to put forth in a simple way how SAP cash and liquidity management can be leveraged. First of all, as you can see, SAP solutions which are grouped under Treasury are, treasury and risk management, cash and liquidity management, in-house cash, bank communication management. There is a logical reason behind this grouping. The integration between these modules are so very important and very high, but our today's focus will be limited to cash and liquidity management. We recommend that you go to our website and download the previous webinar that we had in in-house banking. It will give you really good insights and a few topics which Peter already discussed at the starting point. What are the challenges? In the light of COVID-19 pandemic, many businesses are facing a sudden cash crunch with the broad shock to almost every sector of the economy. Businesses are facing or could be facing challenges not only from your supply chain management. It could be coming from your customers with the new payment terms, vendors with the new payment terms, suppliers, banks, and it could also be coming from your government. So with that limitation and a lot of challenges, your credit and liquidity is getting evaporated. Thus, it is very critical now more than ever for businesses to have reliable cash visibility. Not only for your cash flow forecasting, doesn't matter whether you're using a direct method or indirect method. At the same time, you want to manage your working capital in an efficient manner. We are also hearing, from our existing customers, also in the marketplace, a lot of CEOs and CFOs are being asked by investors and analysts not only about the current and projected cash flows, right? They would also want to hear what's the free cash flow guidance. They want to see how much restricted cash flows we have at the company, any other regulations which is going to impact the movement of the cash. So they're also interested in that model. So with that, Treasury just cannot afford to be conservative with the cash flow forecasting, leaving extra idle cash just in case they were wrong. Thus, it is very important to have the right technology and automated integration process to support the changes required for cash management models. This slide, there are a lot of moving parts in this slide. We're going to try to move from the left to the right. As you can see from this slide, it shows the integrated flow of SAP Treasury management with various inputs and output sources. SAP can also function as a treasury workstation, especially if it's a client have multiple different systems. Doesn't matter whether all the systems are SAP different versions, or you could have multiple ERP system, SAP non-SAP systems. The important question is, how can we achieve global cash visibility? There are different models we use when we work closely with the clients to bring data from different systems into one SAP Treasury workstation, so you could try to utilize all the functions needed, for your global cash visibility, forecasting models, and any variance analysis, based on the scope and the criteria that are required to manage your portfolio. You could do automation, non-automation. It all depends, on the functionality that we're looking for, but different models can be worked together to have the one common visibility. This slide also shows how closely and automatically different processes and functions are integrated. So if you focus on the FX, right, even though the cash management team is not directly involved in the FX exposure management, we might have a risk management, but it is really critical to have the visibility of the exposure management. For most major currencies, FX rates haven't been as volatile as equity, if I compare with equity markets. Yet, any near-term volatility can still create a lot of impact with your cash flow projections and your earning results. So thus, it is very important to arm with insights into exposures and effectiveness of hedging or any natural currencies, with the offset strategies that the client or the customers have will definitely help the CEOs or the CFOs to handle the crisis, whenever it happens. We're not going to go in detail on the exposure management, the hedge management, and any risk analytics linked to that to give the detailed visibility. We're going to have those different webinars coming soon. So we recommend, to go to our website, block your calendars, as and when required, you can to have great insights on those functions. As I was talking before, every functions and process have direct or indirect impact on your cash flow statements, your cash visibility, planning, and forecasting. Thus, it is very important to have the integrated and real-time updates across different functions. Doesn't matter if your process starts from procure to pay, order to cash, fixed assets, payroll, or even treasury functions. All these activities updates SAP cash management on real-time basis, which gives the capabilities to the treasury team with the more accurate and timely information, so you could move the funds as and when required, and to make any investment and debt decisions on the fly. If you see on the right-hand side, we do have the payment management hub. SAP has SOX compliant approvals, which helps customers to have right controls and security in approving the payments. There are other recommendations and critical aspects. When we work with their customers, we recommend them. One of the factors is, which is highly visible and very critical is to enable your payments with OFAC or third-party screening. As Peter was mentioning in the previous slides, it is very critical to have those, screening before we send the payments out to the bank. We understand the third party like SWIFT or banks do the same functionality, but it's too late. You don't want to have your payments red flagged by the banks, which is technically going to go towards the, to the local authorities or to the governments. You don't want that situation. So any emails coming from your top management, why these payments got red flagged. There are other critical factors. In fact, very interesting topic we are seeing is not only coming from your external auditors, but we have seen many customers, internal auditors, they are making all the projects where when it's linked to the payments, doesn't matter whether it's a treasury or accounts payable payments, any payments, they are adding a lot of controls. And at the same time, just seeing a lot of frauds happening in the market. They're enabling dual-factor authentication. So you're not only relying on your SAP access, but also working with the third-party logon and having more security controls. We work with many customers to enable those functionalities with the SAP transactions to have more secure payment mechanisms. Again, we're going to have a webinar coming in next 2 weeks, which is August 12th. You will hear a lot of good options and what customers are looking from a payment management point of view. The other interesting topic is the bank communication management. SAP Connectivity Hubs provides flexible and various options, like, as you can see, on this slide on the right-hand side. It can support SWIFT. It can support, different multi-bank connectivity and different options. We don't predetermine any specific models. What we do is we work closely with customers to understand which model would work in best based on the DNA. So there are a lot of factors which goes in to predetermine any models. Few factors is number of banking partners, number of bank accounts, the regions in which the customers operate, and also volume of transactions. Sometimes if the volume is low, your criteria would change based on the cost and the quick turnover to support those payments. There is another critical aspect, which is managed services. It's not only about supporting your existing process, but is your treasury business ready with the future challenges? Not only the challenges, but could be the opportunities. You're entering into new businesses, or there are any mergers or acquisitions that you could see coming in the future. So this is very critical, and we are working with many customers to support that model, because what happens when there is new mergers and acquisitions, the business that you're buying is not an SAP, and there are many factors you need to think about how we can have those quick turnaround to support your global visibility, your cash forecasting, and banks. If you're entering with a new banking relationship, or even if you are with the existing banking relationship, your banks are asking you to change your file formats and so on. So what we do is, we take care of hosting. We do end-to-end support. We take care of hosting. We do mentioning of the communication challenge, supporting the file transformation. We do work on the security and also the controls to support those changes. I think so. The next is the polling question that we have.
That's right. Yeah. Hi, Jatin. Great job there. I really like to shout out to all the other webinars and things that we've had too, just being for marketing. So thank you. So we want to know now what you're using for your bank account management. Are you using a spreadsheet or a systemic solution that helps you automate the processes? So a lot of people in treasury and finance love spreadsheets. It can get very complex, as we've talked about earlier. Are you using maybe a homegrown tool or database? Maybe you have a bank-provided solution that's very popular with our customers. Maybe a third-party standalone tool. Or are you doing something ERP offered or integrated tools such as what's available out of SAP? I'm assuming we're going to have a few SAP people out there since this is an SAP-focused event, but let's take a look. And Jatin, the example that you brought about onboarding, we recently had a customer story as part of the SAP finance stream. It was really ASUG Forward was the event for the ASUG User Group for Americas, where we talked about how when your organization transforms, how you can also separate your treasury organization. So we had a customer, United Technologies, that was breaking into 3 separate companies due to corporate transformations, and we helped manage all of those services. So whether you're onboarding companies or maybe you're divesting certain parts of your business, certainly Serrala can help you manage your SAP Treasury needs through that. Okay, let's give a few more seconds for people to answer. Anything you want to talk about? Oh, there you go. Okay, perfect. So as expected, most people are using spreadsheets, so 31.6%. Yeah, no surprise there. So a third-party standalone tool, homegrown database, and ERP integrated tool are all fairly close, although the third-party standalone tool is lower. Makes a lot of sense, I think. Do you see a lot of homegrown tools and databases in your experience, Jatin, or is it?
Yeah. So yes, we have seen the first and the second option. It makes sense, especially if the customer is on SAP and they're on ECC. SAP does not have out-of-box solution, for BAM. It just introduced a great functionality on S4HANA, but if you're on ECC or if you're not in the path of S4HANA migration, if you're the process options are spreadsheet and homegrown tool database. But we do have, I think our next topic is linked to this, so I might go to the next slide and I can connect with this polling question. Okay. So we have implemented multiple BAM solution in SAP, whether it's ECC or S4HANA. As Peter mentioned, we were the first, as a company to implement the S4HANA, first project ever implemented from SAP point of view. Even if the customer is not ready for S4HANA migration, we do have products and solutions enabling customers to use BAM in SAP. So if you have any questions, how to use those functions using the tools that we have, please, we can have a follow-up questions or one-on-one on the next steps. Before we talk about, the important features about SAP BAM, let's talk about the challenges and the risks company could face if they're using, as we saw in the previous polling answer, if they're using the spreadsheet or they're using homegrown solution, which is a data access database solution. So basically, BAM is the process where companies manage opening, maintaining, reviewing, and closing of its bank. The other important feature or the management point of view is the administration of the signers. It could be your treasuries, directors, CFOs, controller, and so on. Many organizations, as we saw in the previous polling answer, they manage the process manually via Excel or homegrown solution. It could be access database, where the challenges are because of the various events that happens on a given time. None of those events are dynamically linked together, which creates our issue. We had a customer or a lot of customers which were not using our solution. It took at least a month or two, and I'm not, trying to say anything negative here, but it literally takes that long if you don't have a good solution, especially if your company is globally. If you have a lot of different bank accounts, if you try to find what accounts fall under for FBAR reporting, which I'm trying to, talk in the next few slides, it takes that long. So it's very important to have the right processes and to have the right technology. The other challenges that we have seen, which if you not have a BAM solution, is the signature card. Any board resolutions that are being passed were affected by, like promotions, terminations, new hires, right? So keeping up with those changes in a manual fashion, it takes too much time and make this homegrown or a manual spreadsheet solution very risky and inefficient. Now, I'm not going to talk about most of the features as you can see in the slides, but there are a few very critical ones which I want to cover. The first one is SAP BAM solution. It has a strong anti-fraud component. So without any dual authority of multiple levels of compliant, SOX compliant workflows, bank accounts cannot be created, modified, or closed. The other feature is FBAR, right? That's been quite a challenging if you don't have a sound solution in the system, right? Many companies are or must respond to IRS requirements to provide FBAR reporting. And even with the general audits, this is very daunting task, especially when the organization have multiple bank accounts, they're located around the world. Manual tracking is very time consuming. It's very challenging. You do a lot of mistakes and, you could have a wrong reporting, filing for FBAR. SAP had this functionality, when I say had this functionality, SAP had the functionality for your cash visibility. Now, with the S4HANA, what they did, they enabled the BAM along with the cash visibility, so you could use that feature where you can easily track your FBAR requirements or your responsible signers. There is no mechanism to directly file, for an audit point of view. But, again, we have the tools we can talk about. But at least, out-of-box solution, it gives you the functionality to track those signers. You can download those information, and you can also share those information to your tax team, which could help in filing the FBAR. Another great feature is the bank fee analysis. What it does is it allows you to analyze and reconcile bank fees. With this functionality, our customers were able to compare money spent in different companies, regions, banks. What this functionality gives, they were in a better position where they could monitor the service charges over the time. And with this capability, they were able to renegotiate the contract with the banks, and they were able to reduce the fees. So another great features, if the banks are supporting you the right formats, you could use this functionality to reduce the contract or renegotiate the contract. This is the very interesting slide. We're not going to go in a technical details as most of the participants are from the business side, but would be happy to discuss one-on-one or any questions you may have towards the end. As you can see, SAP on this slide on the lower section, on the platform point of view, SAP can support different infrastructure models. Customer can choose to have infrastructure on-premise. They could choose the cloud, doesn't matter whether if it's a private or publicly hosted, or they could have the hybrid solution. SAP has introduced a lot of innovations and functions on cash management compared to any other functions, across SAP, or if I compare the Treasury suite, they have introduced most or majority of the functions in S4 management. Thus, it is very critical to know what are those changes and how customers can get benefit out of, from SAP solution. So if I talk about the few major enhancements or innovations, SAP S/4HANA, they have completely rewritten and adapted to use or to take the full advantage of S/4HANA, which means the data structure was fundamentally changed. All cash applications now run on one exposure of, from operations. By making this change, SAP has ensured that your liquidity reporting and your cash position reporting are based on the single source of truth and immediately comparable due to identical data structure. In ECC, SAP had the same functionality, but it had to go through different tables. With this S/4HANA, they technically changed the architecture with the same solutioning. Rather than going with different tables, they have just enhanced, into one table structure. So your speed of reporting, and combining the reporting, where you could have the cash positioning, at the same time you could have your cash flow forecasting. You could do your variance analysis if you want to compare your forecasters versus plan. If you want to do your forecasters versus actual, now you could do on real-time basis. Again, when I say SAP used to support that functionality in ECC as well, with S/4HANA, they have combined everything in one reporting capability. So a lot of, on real-time basis has been added on. The other great feature, as I mentioned, is all your forecasting reporting, and one of the major polling answer was, most of the time or the focus is now on the forecasting. With this new functionality, you don't have to stage the data into your business, into your business warehouse. Everything, all the data, whether it's actual planning, budgeting, your visibility, everything is now on real-time basis. Again, we're not going to go in the technical, but SAP has introduced a lot of cloud solutions. It can connect with your, if the customers is still on a path of ECC and not thinking about S/4HANA migration, there are a lot of new functions that have introduced with cloud options as on. And the next few slides, Peter is going to cover on deployment options, the different features on ECC and S/4HANA, and how we are working closely with customers to achieve those goals quickly compared to what we have seen, with the trends in the market.
Great. Thank you, John. Yep. Excuse me. So first, I guess we want to talk about a little bit about the differences between cash management on ECC, cash management powered by HANA. And so fundamentally, both solutions allow you to integrate with your processes in SAP, so accounts payable, accounts receivable, intercompany processing and settlements, in-house banking if you're using those functions, and to incorporate them into the cash management and forecasting solutions. But the ECC version is maybe less user-friendly, let's say, from a functional capabilities of capturing the data, centralizing the data, making the data visible. The solution in ECC is fine. It will satisfy requirements. The ability to group the data, to cluster it in by region or bank or company code or by process, there are numerous ways to be able to cluster those to create cash position groupings and forecasting groupings that are effective in giving visibility in a timely manner, real-time visibility to information, and to incorporate appropriately bank balances in, again, real time, depending on your integration with your banks and how often you're pulling your information, your intraday bank statements for balances and activity. But the ECC version is a workhorse. It can achieve and satisfy the requirements of building a solid cash position and for most organizations' needs. But what has occurred is that with this move to HANA, SAP has re-engineered completely the cash positioning solution and cash management as a whole. As John talked to you about on the bank account management, there wasn't even a bank account management solution in SAP prior to HANA. Now, with the enhancements of HANA in the cash management area and liquidity forecasting, the bank account management is a highly integrated aspect, portion of cash management. In fact, the controls that John talked about with managing the bank account and signatories can be used or are used and incorporated into approval processing for payments. So there is a substantial increase in the functional capabilities and the user, I would say the ease of use and user experience in the HANA environment. So you see on the left-hand side, it's kind of a picture of cash positioning in the ECC environment. Is a fairly bland view. One of the complaints about SAP for the longest time has been that their screens are not especially enticing, and it's not necessarily a great user experience. But the functionality, the capabilities, again, work fine, but the experience of the user has been less than overwhelming. In the new environment, not only was the functionality re-engineered, but the user experience of the screen. So you have the model where you have these tiles, which they call Fiori tiles. This is becoming more and more popular across many different types of platforms. And those tiles can be used for access to transactions, key data, information, key performance indicators can be incorporated there. So it becomes a more user-engaging process. And again, behind the scenes, the functionality has been substantially enhanced as well. When we go to the next slide, there are a variety of, and really too many to list here, a variety of areas that SAP has enhanced in the cash management experience. Again, the new look and feel of screens, more graphical reporting capabilities, the integration of the planning part of the forecasting. Again, Jotin had referenced this to some extent, but a much more tightly integrated solution for the cash planning, cash management, and actuals performance to pull it all together into a more effective and efficient solution for combining and creating global visibility to your overall cash and liquidity needs. And so when we look at really how to optimize a solution, one of the things that we really want to emphasize in this session and any time that we're working with clients is that optimizing a solution is not just about technology. It is a marriage of technology, processes, mechanisms, and structures that are brought together in an optimal way, excuse me, to lead to optimized solutions. So when we showed before, we talked about organizational structure where you're dispersed throughout the world in different countries with different banking relationships. So you can implement the technology of SAP and immediately recognize the benefits of the integration and the visibility and the drill down capability and the consistency of data and the confidence in data, and then gradually over time continue to expand the evolution, let's say, of your organization and your structure and your banking relationships to lead to a world-class solution. So at first you take the technology, put the technology in place to increase efficiency and centralization and integration, and then you can take advantage of other structures, again, banking structures, banking relationships, to refine them in a way that leverages the technology optimally to increase your visibility, increase your control, your oversight, and ultimately your liquidity management. And so what we see when we talk about these things, what are some of these other technologies and organizational structure or optimizations or products offered by banks that can be incorporated along with your SAP cash management and bank management tools to increase that efficiency? VAM, virtual account management, is one of the most popular that we're seeing. And as Jotin had mentioned, in-house banking, or establishing in-house banking structures and leveraging other functionality in SAP. We have webinars that we've already delivered. There's some recordings out there. We have other webinars coming up, and in September we'll be focusing heavily on SAP's in-house cash, which is their in-house banking solution, and talk about how clients have been able to leverage that and solve problems and increase their efficiencies. But when we take these items and take these structures and processes and, again, technologies and products from banks and incorporate them together, there is the ability to achieve tremendous optimization over what most organizations have today. And so the VAM, if you're not aware of that, it's virtual account management. And this is where really single accounts are opened up with the bank, but the subordinate accounts can be created, and to the outside world, they look like normal additional accounts, but the way that the bank charges you on them, the way that the bank manages them is different. The cost basis is lower, and it increases your visibility and control, especially in areas, for example, of cash application, because these sub-accounts in the VAM structure can be set up per relationship, so you can have clarity when a customer delivers those funds into those accounts. And so when you take those kinds of things and you bring them together, the technology of SAP, the products offered by banks, and structurally looking for optimal organizational structures from a banking structure perspective, you can achieve increased efficiencies that can make a substantial difference in reducing your risk and reducing your costs, increasing your visibility and control by concentrating those accounts, increasing centralization, and thereby centralizing the processes and the visibility and reducing the risk. So these are all areas that we see that we think are important, that it's necessary to think in broader terms than in just the terms of single new technology from SAP. You really need to look at and think about what are all the different products and solutions and tools and processes that we can pull together. And these are areas that we feel strongly that we're able to help our clients look at, talk about other experiences where we have clients leveraging these things to lead to optimal solutions. So then the additional part here, we've talked really about the cash positioning, some about the forecasting, but I think one of the tremendous aspects in the new environment where SAP really has come a long way is in the planning area, in the liquidity planning, liquidity forecasting area. They're in ECC, it is possible. They have something called Liquidity Planner, but that is a more challenging solution, I'd say less easily integrated solution. It is integrated, but it is less user-friendly and not quite, I think, as efficient as the solutions they have offered now with the liquidity on S/4HANA. So we can create plans and plan appropriately for forecasting. We can incorporate reporting of plan to actuals. We can incorporate plan to plan. So there's tremendous flexibility and control. And one of the most important things, I think, that we find with clients when we talk about forecasting is, again, you need to think in bigger terms for forecasting, not just in the ability to forecast, but how do you create structures and mechanisms and processes that allow you to improve the performance of your forecasting? And that really relies heavily on actuals analysis. If you don't have actuals analysis that allows you to recognize, identify where your deficiencies and shortcomings are, then it's really impossible to increase the performance or very difficult to increase the performance and the accuracy of your forecasting. So the incorporation of the actuals is tremendous here for creating a continuous feedback loop that allows you to forecast, identify where your inefficiencies or your inaccuracies arise, and then to further refine those on a go-forward basis. So we think that's a very helpful aspect. As far as deployment options, again, John said we're not really going to go into the technical too much here. We can do that, and we will do that. We normally do discuss that heavily with IT departments, but since this is mostly business people, there are a variety of ways to deploy this. We have a sidecar approach. We have central finance approach. But I think the important thing to address here is that there are ways to take advantage of the new S/4HANA functionality, even if the rest of your organization is staying on ECC, and that the timeline or the roadmap for moving to S/4HANA is not for an extended period of time. We have this sidecar approach, which is essentially like using SAP Treasury as a workstation, a standalone workstation that can be integrated directly into SAP using standard integration mechanisms. So those are areas that we can definitely talk about and work with you individually, understanding what your environment is and looking forward. But there are a lot of opportunities and variation of ways to take advantage of that functionality. So then, we've gone through a bunch of different points here. We're obviously coming up onto the end of the webinar, and we want to leave a few moments for questions. We have one more poll question we want to ask. But here's a summary, again, of the liquidity and cash management benefits, we think, within SAP. So you're going to increase your integration, your visibility, your control, your confidence, your real-time access to the information. And all of these things together produce better visibility, higher confidence output as far as your forecasting. And that's going to lead to increased optimization of your liquidity management. Ultimately, can lead to increased or reduced working capital requirements. So the more effectively and efficiently you manage your cash, the less cash you need to lay lying around, which means you can pay down debt, you can invest and get better returns. So all those things are important, and we think they're all possible through SAP, and especially SAP thinking on the grander terms, integration into and use of other products, et cetera, in the marketplace. So then, Christine, if we could do the last polling question, and then hopefully leave a few minutes for questions from the audience.
Yeah, so we want to know which of the benefits that we've discussed today are the most important to your organization. Real-time cash visibility, having an automated integrated solution, forecasting versus actual analysis, being able to do that reliably with fast, accurate data, or maybe audit compliance. So let us know. Again, I would vote for automated integrated solution because it sounds like a lot of processes are still very manual. And then you were saying, Peter, that the functionality between ECC and HANA is really different. So is there any degree of difference in the automation there that you would see? I mean, so...
Well, I think in both of those environments, you can get the same level of automation and actually of capability to have the visibility. I think it's really about the user experience is the primary difference. There are some increased efficiencies of the way the process is run and more control by the end user to build the groupings and the visibility so they have more control at the user level rather than going to IT, which I think is a major difference Treasury is often concerned with and focused on. Being able to be self-sustaining and not have to rely on IT to be able to make changes that work for them. And so that's a critical component in the new environment that I think is one of the larger value propositions
okay,
overall.
One example of those theory tiles is just one example of how the user experience is better, but there's lots of others.
Yeah. So let's see the results here. Okay. So real-time cash visibility, automated integrated solutions. Like you said, that is the one that came out the highest there. Yeah, I don't think that's surprising. When you look at the SAP environment, one of the great aspects is that you get this integration, real-time visibility, integration, automation of payments and receipts all being incorporated into cash position. Other processes and functions automatically being incorporated into the system, into the cash positioning automatically. So I see we're really running out of time. Can we jump right into a couple questions here?
Sure,
or,
yeah.
Oh, actually, I'm sorry. I apologize. Just wanted to, real quickly, we have webinars that we've already done. Please take advantage of going out there. You can look at those webinars. We think there's a lot of great information. We have a webinar coming up next week that we would love for you to participate in. We also have, in the coming months in our fall series, we'll be doing weekly webinars in the areas of in-house cash, payments, and in cash management as well. So please join us, and the links are available in the webinar, and this will be downloadable after the session as well. So if we could jump into some questions, if we have some.
Yeah, and if I could just say, we had one attendee that was having trouble with the sound. Those links also bring you to the recordings of previous sessions. So if you have any trouble accessing the content today, you can always go back and look at some of these. But our next webinar is on payments, and this is kind of the question from the audience is, can you give me a few more details about how payments work or payment approvals work in SAP? They currently use a
Well, yeah, you know what? I'll give a quick answer to that, but we are having the payment session in 2 weeks, so I think that may be a better venue to deliver on that information. But within SAP, there is tremendous capability for workflow, as I said, and John mentioned, incorporation of the bank account management signatories to layer in those to identify the level, the number of approvals that are required. We can control those by amounts, limits, et cetera, for different people. And so I think there's a tremendous incorporation of the new bank account management functionality and capability and the approvals and controls process over payment execution in the treasury space and in other functions with payment orientation.
Okay, yeah, join us on
I think going to that other session will be helpful as well.
Okay, and then so the next question is, how does SAP reflect the changing status of activities in the cash position?
So, John, do you want to address this?
Yeah, sure. Yes. So as we talked on a high level point of view, and Peter mentioned that all the functions, doesn't matter where the processes start, whether it's starting from your purchase orders or purchase acquisition, all the way to your payments, or similar, from order to cash, whether it's coming from treasury management, is everything, any transactions you do, it has direct or indirect. It's very smart enough to take the information coming from any of those sources and automatically get integrated, to the cash management. When I say cash management, it's not only your cash position, you can have the real-time visibility on your forecasting, on your actuals versus, planning. So it does take the whole cycle. So if you start, again, with the purchase order, and as soon as those purchase orders are converted into your actual, liability, whether it's the invoice, system is smart enough to close the old and, create the new cash flows for your forecasting or anything. So it's very integrated. It's one of the biggest, benefit of using SAP, and utilize the architecture with new functionality, as Peter mentioned, and combine everything on the cash flow, on the cash visibility.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so last question I think we've got time for today. So is it possible to do intraday bank statement processing with an SAP, and if so, how?
I'll take that. So the answer is yes, absolutely, and that's true whether you're in ECC or in S/4HANA, that the ability to integrate with the banks, in the diagram that John had shown, it shows that there are a variety of different mechanisms and means for us to integrate to the banks, either directly through a VAN, through communication through SWIFT. So we can connect with the banks to retrieve data through a variety of different formats, structures, and systems. And also the frequency and the timeliness of those updates can be substantially different as well. We have some companies that will poll the banks only a couple times per day. We have other companies that are essentially using almost real-time XML messaging for intraday activity, so that their bank account positions and their actual activity for the cash positioning is updated essentially in real time. And that is really cutting edge. That's an amazing functionality. But incorporating those through the mechanism, standard SAP mechanisms, but then you just have to determine what's the frequency, because there's a cost associated with that, obviously. So aligning the cost and the value is the critical part. And we welcome the opportunity to talk about these and any other topics with you. Obviously, I see we're running out of time. I hope that this has been informative, and we would certainly welcome the opportunity to talk with you about any of these topics in more detail, because each organization is different. Cash management is a common topic, but how you deliver on it and what is necessary in each environment is very much unique.
Absolutely. So thank you, Peter. Thank you, Jatin, for your time today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Again, the session will be recorded, and you can